Good evening, everybody. We're on the fourth, coming up to the fourth Sunday of Lent in preparation for Easter. It's just on the horizon. And in this fourth Sunday, the reading is from the Gospel of St. Luke. And in chapter 15, verse 11 to 32, there's a story of what we call the prodigal son. It might be better to call it the merciful father, because truly the Father is the center of this gospel passage. Now the first son then that we're looking at would be the second son. He demands of his father his part of the inheritance. And as probably as every youth, every person who grows up, they need to find their own way. They need to find their freedom. The amazing thing, again, is the attitude of the father towards this demand. The father absolutely could have refused to do that. But he favors the becoming of this son. Probably, most likely, doesn't agree with the method he took, but he frees him. He loves him so much, he's willing to lose him, almost. And we'll see why that's a very good thing. We're looking at in the father is an attitude of goodness, la bontà, we'd say in Italian. So the first son takes everything, goes off, and he finds himself in need. He wastes all of his money, all of his savings, and he finds himself in need. He doesn't even have anything to eat. So the gospel passage says, in Italian it says, rientrare in se stesso. He re-enters himself. He goes back into himself. And it's really interesting, because that is how you find your freedom. You find your freedom going back to yourself, because back down to the seed that was planted in you, the germ of the thought of who you are, that's where you find true freedom and your wholeness. So he goes back into himself, and he reasons that the way he chose was a way that brought him to this end of famine and poverty, and he doesn't know then what to do. But he comes back to the thought of his father. In my father's house. So again, going back to the image of the father, see that the father's seed had planted in his son, who needed to search out his own way, but his father planted in him a sense of belonging, or a sense of peace. And so much so that the son now decides he can go back to his father, admit that he was wrong, and take the last place in the house. And so the son begins his voyage of, we'd say, conversion. And exactly what conversion means in the old Greek is go back the way you came, turn around and retrace your steps back to where that crossroad was, and you choose your road. And if you go back to that road, then that's how you find your way again. So exactly that is what the son does. Goes back into himself. He reasons, like, in my father's house there's bread even for the lowest slave in those times. And so he says, I can go back to my father, I'll tell him I was wrong, and I'll ask him to take me on as a slave, and I won't be sitting here. That's the right thing to do. So it's amazing that the son can get to that, but he can get to that, and we'll get into this deeper in the next video. He get to that because the father built a relationship with him that allowed him to be free, allowed him to try to find his way, but also allows him to come back now to the house of the father and continue his voyage, probably in a much more holy or wholesome, in sense of holy, wholesome way, that's really going to allow him, now he's come back to himself, and that's going to allow him to really be able to express his true being, his true essence. And that's the voyage we need to be on. That's what conversion is about. Go back. When you get off the track, go back to those crossroads. So, well, let's now move on to a second video. We'll look at the image of the Father.